Hello, welcome to this week's episode of Did Shakespeare. I'm Cassidy Cash. Back in 2015, Time magazine as well as Smithsonian magazine reported on a scientific discovery made in Shakespeare's garden where they found clay pipes. They tested these pipes and found that they were laced with things like cocaine and cannabis, leading a lot of historians to debate whether or not William Shakespeare had smoked weed. It was a massive report at the time, and we did an episode on it here on Did Shakespeare that you can find a link to right below this video. In this week's episode, we're exploring the arrival of tobacco in England in 1565 when William Shakespeare was just 1 year old by asking the question, did Shakespeare smoke tobacco? Tobacco grows natively here in North America. In fact, it grows all over North and much of South America, all by its little self. It just grows here. And so it was already established here. A lot of the native tribes that lived in what is now the United States already enjoyed this plant recreationally, as well as a lot of traditional medicines. Well, when Columbus came over in 1492, he discovered tobacco here and he took it back to Europe. Despite catching on in Spain once Columbus got back home with it, it took a while for it to move across Europe. England would not catch on to tobacco as a substance it wanted to partake in until 1565, when William Shakespeare was just 1 year old. Once it was there, though, it was extremely popular. That's due in no small part to the fact that tobacco is addictive. So once people tried it, they wanted to keep using it. The primary attraction to tobacco, however, wasn't actually recreational. It was really for medicine. There's one doctor from the 16th century that wrote tobacco was useful in over 36 ailment treatments. And this was everything from making you feel better when you had something like cancer to them thinking it actually cured things like bad breath. That's surprising to me, but that's what they thought in the 16th century. Despite its initial popularity, it doesn't seem to have taken long for people to have connected tobacco with some of its more dangerous effects. King James I of England actively tried to dissuade people from using the plant, writing that it was both addictive and that it left a black soot in the lungs. King James was the first to tax tobacco, which, while I think that tax was intended to dissuade people from using tobacco, it ended up being a big boon in income for the government because people wanted to use tobacco. So a lot of people paid the tax to be able to do so. And that is the addictive part that they seem to have known about in the 17th century, because Francis Bacon wrote in 1610 that tobacco was extremely hard to quit. At some points during Shakespeare's lifetime, tobacco was actually used as a kind of currency, being known literally as good as gold. The fledgling colony of Jamestown took advantage of tobacco's lucrative nature by making it its main source of income as it tried to establish itself here in North America. In what is now Virginia, Jamestown was founded, and almost as soon as they were founded, they started exporting tobacco from the New World. The production of tobacco demonstrates the growth of popularity in tobacco back in Europe, because as you watch the export of tobacco from Jamestown, it grows almost exponentially over the few years. One writer, Mike Davey from the University of Minnesota, writes that in 1614, Jamestown colony sent its first shipment of tobacco to England. It was rather modest in size. Now, I don't know, he doesn't list what modest is, but he sees just a decade later, 1624 saw 200,000 pounds sold to England, while by 1638, they were selling 3 million pounds. And during the 1680s, Jamestown was producing over 25 million pounds of tobacco per year to sell to Europe. So this was the reason Jamestown was able to grow and be successful and get a foothold here was by selling tobacco back to Europe. Now, as far as how they smoked tobacco during Shakespeare's lifetime, one report from Cambridge says that most likely Shakespeare would have used a clay pipe. Interestingly, the size of clay pipe varied greatly, but they were sometimes known as tobacco pipes. Apparently, the Native Americans that the Europeans learned about tobacco from already used terracotta pipes. They were made from the clay in the ground here in North America, and it was just a clay pipe that had been fashioned. So that was the fashion that went back to Europe, and there were these tobacco pipes that were made from clay. Depending on what status you had in society, would determine the shape of your pipe. Apparently, the middle class liked the long stems pipes, but the working class liked the shorter stems because they could hold it between their teeth. Clay pipes for smoking tobacco was popular during Shakespeare's lifetime, and that fits in with the research the scientists did in Shakespeare's garden, where they discovered clay pipes being there. It makes sense for there to have been clay pipes in Shakespeare's garden. Find links to the research about the discovery of clay pipes in Shakespeare's garden, along with our episode on Did Shakespeare Smoke Weed, in the show notes for today's episode. Be sure to hit subscribe and join us here every week on YouTube. We're trying to get to 1,000 subscribers, so please help us reach our goal by hitting subscribe and joining us right here on YouTube for even more history. Until next time, I'm Cassidy Cash, and I hope you learned something new about the Bard. I'll see you next week. Bye-bye.